In the dusty archives of Sicily are documents that the Catholic Church has been trying to unseal for over 200 years. Yellowed pages, covered in faded ink, tell a story that chills the blood. These papers reveal the mystery of the disappearance of Father Giuseppe Caruso, the parish priest of a small church on the outskirts of Palermo. This channel is not for everyone, but if you stay with us, we will guide you through a labyrinth of secrets, betrayal, and faith tested to its limits. The sun slowly dips below the horizon, painting the ancient walls of the Santa Maria del Soccorso Church in shades of gold and blood. The restoration workers are finishing their day, but today they are in no hurry to leave. In their eyes, you can see a mixture of horror and curiosity. Today, after unsealing a boarded-up confessional in the far corner of the church, they discovered something that shocked not only them but also the entire local community. In the secret compartment of the confessional lay a package wrapped in yellowed fabric. Inside was the diary of a priest who disappeared over 200 years ago, a blood-stained handkerchief, and records of confessions containing information that could cost lives. This discovery finally sheds light on the fate of Father Giuseppe, whose disappearance in 1710 became one of the darkest mysteries of this region. Before we continue this unsettling tale, consider: are you ready to learn the truth that the church has hidden for centuries? The morning mist shrouded the hills around Palermo on that distant morning in 1803, when a young priest, Giuseppe Caruso, first arrived at the parish of Santa Maria del Soccorso. He was only 28 years old, but in his eyes you could already see the wisdom of a man who had seen the world. The son of a poor shoemaker, he managed to get an education thanks to his sharp mind and the patronage of the local bishop, who noticed the talented boy. The parish he was about to lead was small and poor, located a few kilometers from Palermo, in an area where the peasants still lived as their ancestors had centuries ago. The first entries in Father Giuseppe's diary are full of hope and enthusiasm. He writes, May 12, 1803. Today I arrived at my new home. The church is small, but it has its own beauty. The people greeted me with caution, which is natural. They don't know me and I don't know them. But with God's help, we will find common ground. The locals were indeed initially suspicious of the new priest. They were simple people, peasants and artisans, living in a close-knit community where everyone knew each other, and strangers were met with distrust. Sicily in the early 19th century was a place where the past and present intertwined in a strange dance. Napoleonic wars raged in Europe, but here, in this isolated community, time seemed to stand still. The peasants still believed in ancient superstitions, wore amulets against the evil eye, and turned to local healers as much as they prayed in church. Father Giuseppe noted with surprise in his diary how pagan customs were closely intertwined with Christian faith in the minds of his parishioners. Into this world, frozen between eras, in 1805, arrived the Risa family, wealthy landowners whose influence in Palermo grew with each passing year. They acquired a large estate not far from the village and immediately became the center of attention of the locals. The head of the family, Don Salvatore Risa, was an authoritative and ambitious man. His wife, Donna Lucrezia, was famous for her beauty and arrogance. They had two sons, Marco and Antonio, both educated in France, who brought with them new ideas and manners that seemed alien and strange to the locals. Father Giuseppe recorded his first impression of the Risa family on September 8, 1805. Today, the Risa family attended Massachusetts. They made a strong impression on the parishioners with their expensive clothes and manners. Don Salvatore made a generous donation to repair the church roof, for which I expressed my deep gratitude. However, something in his gaze makes me feel uneasy. Perhaps this is just a prejudice against the rich and powerful, which I should get rid of. With the appearance of the Risa family, changes began to occur in the small community. Don Salvatore bought up the peasants' lands, promising them work on his estate and protection from the arbitrariness of local authorities. Many agreed, seeing this as a chance for a more stable life. However, some refused to sell their land, and then, as Father Giuseppe noted in his diary, strange incidents began to happen. Livestock disappeared, fires occurred, and sometimes the peasants found strange signs in front of their houses, which were considered harbingers of misfortune. Meanwhile, Father Giuseppe gradually gained the trust of his parishioners. He was not only a spiritual mentor but also a teacher for the local children, whom he taught to read and write. He helped the peasants in disputes with landowners, writing petitions and appeals for them. In his diary, he noted, March 3rd, 1906. Today, I helped the Bianchi family to file a complaint against the actions of Don Salvatore's manager, who unfairly accused their son of theft. The boy is innocent, I am sure of it. But the word of a poor peasant against the word of a rich landowner means little in this world. Over time, Father Giuseppe's authority grew, and this could not but worry the Risa family, whose influence was partly based on the fear and dependence of the peasants. Don Salvatore began to take a special interest in the affairs of the church, regularly making donations and insisting that his opinion be taken into account in all important decisions. He even offered to finance a complete restoration of the church, including a new confessional, which he ordered from the best craftsmen in Palermo. The entries in Father Giuseppe's diary begin to change tone in the spring of 1807. He writes, April 17th, 1807. Today, the new confessional donated by Don Salvatore was installed. The work is truly excellent. The wood carvings are done with amazing skill, but for some reason, this offering makes me anxious. Don Salvatore insisted that the craftsmen work in the church at night when no one is around. He explained this by wanting to make a surprise for the parishioners, but something in his explanation sounds insincere. Several months later, an entry appears in the diary that makes you think, August 2nd, 1807. Today, during confession, I heard something strange. It seemed to me that someone else was listening to the confession with me. I inspected the confessional after the service but found nothing unusual. Perhaps this is a figment of my imagination, but the feeling was very real. In the same year, an incident occurred in the village that further increased the tension between Father Giuseppe and the Risa family. A young peasant woman, Maria Esposito, who worked as a maid in the Risa house, suddenly threw herself into a well. Miraculously, she was saved, and when Father Giuseppe visited her, she spoke deliriously about a sin that could not be forgiven and about hands that defile. When the priest tried to find out what happened in the Risa house, Don Salvatore flew into a rage and forbade him from seeing the girl, stating that she was suffering from a mental disorder and would be sent to relatives in another province for treatment. From which regions are you listening to this story? Leave a comment. We are interested to know how wide our audience is. More and more alarming entries appear in Father Giuseppe's diary. He begins to notice that some parishioners become strangely distant after confession, avoid his gaze, and some stop coming to church altogether. In October of 1807, he writes, I feel that something is wrong in my church. Confession, which should bring relief to the soul, instead seems to cause even more fear in some parishioners. Today, old Agata DiMaggio told me after Mass that she is afraid to confess because the walls have ears. I tried to convince her that the secrecy of confession is sacred, but she only shook her head and left. Meanwhile, the Risa family's influence in the region continued to grow. Don Salvatore established close ties with the new governor of Palermo and even, according to rumors, had patrons at the court in Naples. His sons, Marco and Antonio, often through lavish receptions that were attended by the nobility from all over Sicily. These festivities became the subject of gossip among the locals, who told of strange rituals and obscene entertainment taking place behind the closed doors of the Risa villa. In the spring of 1808, an event occurred which, according to the entries in the diary, deeply shocked Father Giuseppe. A young woman came to the church, whose face he could not make out under a thick veil. She asked for confession and, once in the confessional, told a story that made the priest's blood run cold. She spoke of gatherings taking place in the basements of the Risa villa, where young women and men were forced to participate in actions that she could not describe without shuddering. She mentioned strange symbols inscribed on the walls, masks worn by the participants, and smoke from incense that made everyone lose their will and obey orders. Father Giuseppe recorded, April 12, 1808. Today I heard a confession that haunts me. If even half of what this woman said is true, then deeds are being done in the Risa house for which the Lord punished entire cities. But I have no proof, and the secrecy of confession does not allow me to act on the basis of what I have heard. What should I do? Keep silent, knowing that innocence may suffer, or violate my sacred duty? In the following months, Father Giuseppe seems to have begun his own investigation. Encrypted entries containing names and dates appear in his diary. He often left the parish, saying that he was visiting the sick on remote farms. Once he returned with a bruised face, explaining to the parishioners that he had fallen off his horse. But in his diary he wrote the truth. September 3rd, 1808. Today, I was intercepted on the road to Palermo by two men with covered faces. They said that I was too interested in matters that did not concern me and that next time the conversation would be more serious. They know where I went and who I spoke to. I have only one explanation. Someone is reporting every step I take to Don Salvatore. In the winter of 1809, Father Giuseppe fell ill with a severe fever and was between life and death for several weeks. He was cared for by an elderly parishioner, Lucia Afferanti, who later said that in his delirium, the priest constantly spoke of voices in the walls and eyes that saw everything. When he finally recovered, he seemed to be a changed man, more withdrawn and cautious. There are many gaps in the diary from this period, and the existing entries are brief and vague. In the spring of 1809, Father Giuseppe unexpectedly received a letter from his old mentor, the Bishop of Messina, who invited him to come for an important conversation. In his diary, the priest writes, April 2nd, 1809. Tomorrow I am leaving for Messina. I hope the bishop can give me advice or help. I can no longer carry this burden alone. Strange things are happening in my church. I am almost certain that the confessional somehow allows confessions to be eavesdropped on, but by whom and why? The meeting with the bishop, according to subsequent entries, brought Father Giuseppe some relief. The bishop listened to his concerns and promised to send a trusted person for a secret investigation. However, he also warned the young priest against hasty accusations against such an influential family as the Risa without irrefutable evidence. Returning to his parish, Father Giuseppe found that the atmosphere in the village had changed during his absence. People became even more withdrawn, and some openly avoided him. From his housekeeper, he learned that Don Salvatore had spread a rumor that the young priest was suffering from a mental disorder due to the fever he had suffered and saw conspiracies where there were none. The summer of 1809 was marked by a series of strange incidents in the parish. First, someone desecrated the statue of the Virgin Mary, breaking her face. Then a small fire broke out in the church, destroying part of the archive. And in August, a young altar boy, Pietro, who helped Father Giuseppe in the church, disappeared without a trace. Officially, it was believed that the boy had run away to Palermo, but the priest, in his diary, expressed his conviction that something terrible had happened to Pietro. Leave a comment with your theory about what happened to Pietro. We read all your assumptions. In September of 1809, a priest named Father Antonio arrived at the parish, introducing himself as the bishop's envoy. He stayed in the priest's house and, according to the entries in the diary, conducted a thorough examination of the confessional. After several days of work, he discovered an ingenious mechanism built into the back wall of the priest's booth. This mechanism made it possible to discreetly open a small hole through which it was possible not only to hear everything that was said during confession but also to see the face of the confessor. Father Giuseppe recorded, September 4th, 1809. Father Antonio confirmed my worst fears. The confessional donated by Don Salvatore is indeed an instrument of espionage. But who is using this device and, most importantly, why? What benefit can Don Salvatore derive from knowing the sins of my simple parishioners? Father Antonio suggested sealing the mechanism, but I insisted on leaving everything as it was. Now that we know of its existence, we can use it to catch the spy red-handed. The plan devised by the two priests was simple and dangerous. At the same time, they decided to set a trap using a false confession. Father Antonio, whose face was not known in the village, was to come to confession and tell a story about allegedly hidden church treasures that he had learned about. Then they planned to set up surveillance of the confessional to catch whoever came to look for the non-existent treasure. However, the plan was not implemented. In the evening of the same day, when they worked out their strategy, armed men in masks burst into the priest's house. Father Antonio was killed on the spot by a shot to the head, and Father Giuseppe was brutally beaten and taken away in an unknown direction. The last entry in his diary is dated the morning of that day. Today, we will put our plan into action. Lord, give us strength and protect us from the evil we intend to expose. What happened next can only be learned from fragmentary evidence and documents found with the diary. Among them is a letter written in a trembling hand, presumably by Father Giuseppe himself, and dated January 3, 1810. In it, the priest describes his imprisonment in the basement of the Risa villa, where he was kept in chains and regularly subjected to physical abuse. He writes about strange sounds coming from neighboring cells, about cries that subsided by morning, and about regular visits from Don Salvatore, who each time offered him freedom in exchange for complete silence about what he knew or suspected. In the letter, Father Giuseppe also mentions his escape plan. One of the servants, a young man named Francesco, seems to sympathize with me. He gave me this letter and promised to help me escape when the masters leave for the carnival in Palermo. If I manage to escape, I will immediately go to the bishop with evidence of the crimes of the Risa family. If not, then let this letter be my last testament. I have seen things that should not exist in the Christian world. I have heard rites that are an insult to God and humanity. The Risa family are not just criminals. They are servants of a darkness that is much older and more terrible than a simple mortal can imagine. The documents found in the confessional cache also include several sheets with records of confessions made by Father Giuseppe. These records, although a violation of the secrecy of confession, shed light on what was happening in the Risa estate. They contain confessions from servants and estate workers telling of strange rituals held on the full moon, of people who were brought to the estate and never returned, of basements where the walls were covered with strange symbols, and of books in unknown languages that Don Salvatore and his sons read by the light of black candles. Particularly disturbing is the confession of a certain Rosalia, a maid in the Risa house, dated March of 1809. She tells of a room in the west wing of the villa where none of the servants were allowed to enter. One day, when the family had left for Palermo, curiosity got the better of her, and she peeked into the forbidden room. What she saw there made her flee the estate the same night. She speaks of walls hung with strange instruments, of a table with straps for fixing a person, and of a floor covered with dark stains, which she took for blood. But most of all, she was struck by the portraits on the walls, images of men and women with faces frozen in horror, painted with such skill that it seemed they were about to scream. Among the documents was also found a blood-stained handkerchief with the embroidered initials GC, presumably belonging to Father Giuseppe Caruso. Analysis by modern forensic scientists confirmed that the stains on the handkerchief were indeed human blood, although it was impossible to carry out a more accurate identification due to the age of the blood. So what happened to Father Giuseppe after January of 1810? Was he able to carry out his escape plan? The documents found in the confessional do not give a direct answer to this question. However, in the archives of the Bishopric of Messina, a letter was found dated March of 1810, in which the local governor informs the bishop of a strange incident. A severe fire broke out on the Risa estate, destroying the west wing of the villa. In the ruins, the charred remains of several people were found, which could not be identified. Among the dead was supposedly Don Salvatore Risa, although his sons, Marco and Antonio, miraculously escaped and soon after left Sicily, according to rumors, for France. In the same letter, the governor casually mentions that shortly before the fire, a strange man dressed as a priest was seen on the estate, but with his face hidden by a hood. The servants took him for a new chaplain whom Don Salvatore had allegedly hired and did not prevent his movements around the estate. Was this mysterious man Father Giuseppe, who had returned to avenge his tormentors? Or perhaps it was the bishop's envoy, who arrived too late to save the young priest, but in time to put an end to the dark deeds of the Risa family. Before we continue this unsettling tale, share your thoughts with us. What do you think happened on that fateful night? The official version adopted by the church and local authorities was that Father Giuseppe Caruso left his parish of his own free will in early 1810, possibly due to health problems or a crisis of faith. His place was taken by a new priest, Father Domenico Bianchi, who served in the parish until his death in 1943. The strange events preceding Father Giuseppe's disappearance were preferred not to be remembered, and the confessional donated by the Risa family continued to be used until the 1850s, when it was replaced by a more modern one. However, other versions of this story have been preserved in the popular memory. Local legends tell of the ghost of a young priest who appears in the church on the night before All Saints' Day, inspecting the confessional with an expression of infinite sadness on his face. Other stories claim that Father Giuseppe did not die but fled Sicily and many years later returned under a different name to secretly bury his diary and other evidence in the confessional, knowing that someday the truth would come out. Modern historians and researchers studying the found documents offer various interpretations of these events. Some see them as simply a case of corruption and abuse of power by an influential family, which used the secrecy of confession to obtain compromising information about the villagers. This information could then be used for blackmail and manipulation, helping the Risa family strengthen their power in the region. Other researchers point to the more sinister aspects of this story, linking the Risa family to secret societies that were widespread in Europe in the early 19th century. Professor of history at the University of Palermo, Marco Contarella, who devoted several years to studying this case, writes, "The time of the Napoleonic Wars was a period not only of political but also of spiritual upheaval. Many members of the European elite turned to occult practices, mixing elements of ancient pagan cults with distorted Christian rituals. The Risa family, judging by the documents found, may have been associated with one of these secret societies, perhaps even with a branch of the Illuminati operating in Sicily. Of particular interest is the mention in Father Giuseppe's notes of strange symbols and rituals held on the Risa estate. Comparative analysis shows a striking resemblance to descriptions found in other documents from that period related to the activities of occult groups in various parts of Europe. Individual symbols drawn by the priest in the margins of his diary have a clear resemblance to ancient Sicilian and Etruscan religious symbols, but are arranged in sequences that suggest a distorted, perverted use. In 2023, after the discovery of the cache in the confessional, the Palermo authorities authorized archaeological excavations at the site of the former Risa estate, most of which burned down in 1810, and the remaining buildings were destroyed during the 1908 earthquake. The results of these excavations proved to be even more alarming than could have been assumed based on written evidence. Under the ruins of the west wing of the villa, archaeologists discovered a complex system of underground premises not marked on any of the known plans of the estate. These basements included several chambers with chains built into the walls, a room with the remains of an altar made of black marble, and, most frightening, a mass grave of human remains in a deep shaft dug under the central room of the basement. Preliminary analysis showed that the shaft contained the remains of at least 47 people of various ages and genders, and that many of the bones showed signs of violent death, fractures, traces of cutting instruments, and even traces of teeth, presumably human. Radiocarbon analysis confirmed that most of the remains dated from the period between 1805 and 1810, which coincides with the time the Risa family was on the estate. This channel is not for everyone, but if you are still with us, you are beginning to understand the scale of the horror that was hidden behind the respectable facade of the Risa family. Among the artifacts found in the basement, a small box made of ebony attracted particular attention, remarkably well preserved due to the fact that it was walled up in one of the walls. Inside were miniature portraits painted on ivory plates, each no larger than the palm of a hand. The portraits depicted men and women of different ages with expressions of extreme horror or pain on their faces. On the back of each portrait was written a name and date, as well as a strange symbol resembling a distorted Christian cross. Criminologist Laura Rossi, who participated in the study of the finds, suggested, "These miniatures could have been a kind of trophy, which were created either directly before the murder of the victim or at the moment of his death. The artist must have possessed extraordinary talent to convey the expression of human suffering with such accuracy. Perhaps this was one of Don Salvatore's sons, Antonio, who, according to contemporaries, studied painting in France. A particularly disturbing find was a portrait that, according to experts, depicts none other than Father Giuseppe Caruso. A comparison with the only known image of the priest, a small watercolor kept in the archive of the Bishopric of Messina, shows an undeniable resemblance, although in the miniature from the box, the face is distorted by pain and the eyes are full of horror. On the back of this portrait is written, Father Giuseppe Caruso, February 7th, 1810. This date sheds light on the fate of the missing priest. Apparently, he failed to carry out his planned escape, and he remained a prisoner of the Risa family until February of 1810. What happened to him during this month can only be guessed, but judging by the expression on his face in the portrait, his last days were filled with suffering. It is interesting that the fire that destroyed the west wing of the Risa villa occurred on February 9th, 1810, only 2 days after the alleged death of Father Giuseppe. Was this just a coincidence? Or did someone deliberately start the fire to cover up the traces of crimes? And if so, who could this mysterious avenger have been? In the archives of the Bishopric of Messina, a letter has been preserved, sent to the bishop by a certain Father Benedetto, dated February 15th, 1810. In it, the priest reports that he has completed the mission entrusted to him and that the evil that had nested in the Risa estate was destroyed by the fire of purification. He also mentions that the soul of our brother, our Jew, now he can finally find peace, and his martyrdom will not go unrewarded. The historian Antonio Garofalo suggests that Father Benedetto might have been the mysterious man in priestly garb who was seen at the Risa estate shortly before the fire. It is quite likely that the Bishop of Messina, having received alarming information from Father Antonio before his murder, decided to act more decisively and sent his trusted man to investigate and possibly assist Father Giuseppe. However, discovering that the young priest was already dead, Father Benedetto may have taken on the role of avenger. What happened to Don Salvatore's sons after the fire? According to official documents, Marca and Antonio Risa left Sicily in the spring of 1810 and went to France, where their trail disappears. However, in the archives of the French police of that period, there are mentions of 2 Italian brothers arrested in Lyon in 1811 on charges of a series of brutal crimes, including kidnapping and fatal consequences for several young women. The description of these brothers largely coincides with what is known about Don Salvatore's sons. What city are you from? Leave a comment. We are interested in knowing the geography of our audience. According to police reports, strange ritual objects, books on black magic, and several miniature portraits painted on ivory plates, strikingly similar to those found in the basement of the Villa Risa, were discovered in the brothers' rented apartment. The brothers were found guilty and sentenced to death, which took place in Lyon on December 23, 1811. Interestingly, the execution report mentions the strange behavior of one of the brothers, presumably Antonio, who before his last breath shouted in an incomprehensible language and drew strange symbols in the air. The priest present at the execution later wrote that he had never seen a man so clearly marked by the devil. Let's return to the confessional where documents were found that shed light on this dark story. How did Father Giuseppe's diary and other evidence end up hidden in the secret compartment? And who could have placed them there? One theory suggests that Father Benedetto might have done it after taking revenge on the Risa family. Perhaps he discovered the diary and other documents in the estate before setting it on fire and decided to keep them as evidence of the crimes, but could not publicize them due to the sensitive information concerning confessions. Another theory connects the hiding place with Francesco, the servant whom Father Giuseppe mentioned in his last letter as a possible helper in his escape. According to some accounts, after the fire at the Risa estate, a young man matching the description, Francesco, lived for some time in the village, helping the new priest, Father Domenico Bianchi, in the church. Perhaps it was he who hid the documents in the confessional, fulfilling Father Giuseppe's last wish. However, these documents remained hidden for over 200 years, waiting for the moment when the truth about the dark deeds of the Risa family and the martyrdom of Father Giuseppe Caruso would finally come to light. In 2023, after the discovery of the hiding place in the confessional and subsequent archaeological excavations at the site of the Risa estate, the local bishop initiated the process of beatification of Father Giuseppe as a martyr for the faith. According to him, the story of Father Giuseppe Caruso is an example of how one person, faithful to his calling and duty, can resist the forces of evil, even at the cost of his own life. Today, the small church of Santa Maria del Soccorso has become a place of pilgrimage for believers from all over Italy. The confessional in which the documents were found is on display in a small museum at the church, along with copies of Father Giuseppe's diary and other historical materials related to this story. The originals of the documents are kept in the Vatican archives, where their study continues. Locals claim that sometimes at night in the church you can hear a quiet voice whispering a prayer in the old Sicilian dialect. Some believe that it is the spirit of Father Giuseppe, who finally found peace when the truth about his fate became known to the world. Historians and criminal investigators continue to study this dark page of Sicilian history, trying to answer the remaining questions. What was the true nature of the rituals performed at the Riza estate? Were they really connected with occult practices, or was it just a disguise for more mundane, albeit no less terrible, crimes? How many people actually fell victim to the Riza family during their 5 years in Sicily, and did they have accomplices among the local nobility and church hierarchs? In 2024, a group of Italian geneticists received permission to study the remains found in the mass grave under the Villa Riza. Using modern DNA analysis methods, they hope to identify at least some of the victims and possibly find their descendants among the current residents of the region. This research may shed additional light on the scale and nature of the crimes of the Riza family. Meanwhile, archives throughout Europe continue to search for documents that might contain mentions of the Riza family and their activities. Of particular interest are the archives of the French police and court records related to the case of the Italian brothers executed in Lyon in 1811. If it can be irrefutably proven that these brothers were indeed Marca and Antonio Riza, it will be further confirmation of the version that the family was involved in systematic crimes, not only in Sicily but also abroad. Dr. Elena Morelli, a psychologist and specialist in criminal psychology studying the Riza family case, notes, "What we see in this case goes beyond ordinary criminal pathology. The systematic nature of the crimes, their ritual aspect, the collection of trophies in the form of portraits of victims. All this indicates deep psychological deviations, possibly shared by all family members. In modern terminology, we could be talking about family psychopathy amplified by shared sadistic tendencies and possibly a belief in some perverse ideology or cult." A particularly alarming aspect of this story is the use of the confessional as a tool for gathering information. The secrecy of confession, one of the most sacred principles of the Catholic Church, was cynically violated to gain power over parishioners. Knowing their innermost sins and fears gave the Riza family a powerful lever for manipulation and control. Professor of Theology Giovanni Albani comments, "In the history of the Church, there have been cases when the secrecy of confession was violated for political reasons, especially during periods of religious wars and inquisitions, but the case of the Riza family stands out for its premeditation and technical sophistication. The mechanism built into the confessional testifies to careful planning and significant resources invested in this espionage system." Before we continue this disturbing story, consider how often in history power and influence have been used to conceal the darkest crimes. One of the most mysterious aspects of this story remains the connection of the Riza family with secret societies of that time. In Father Giuseppe's diary, there are vague references to a brotherhood, whose members, in his opinion, were Don Salvatore and his sons. He writes about strange symbols that he saw in the estate and about fragments of conversations that he accidentally overheard, where some ancient knowledge and great work were mentioned. Historian of the occult Alexander Venuti suggests, "The beginning of the 19th century was a time of flourishing of various secret societies in Europe. Some of them, such as the Freemasons, were relatively harmless and focused on philosophical and political ideas. Others, however, practiced darker rituals, often borrowed from distorted interpretations of ancient pagan cults. The symbols described by Father Giuseppe and the rituals performed at the Riza estate have similarities with the practices of some splinter branches of the Illuminati and other occult groups of that period. Interestingly, in the archives of the Palermo police of that time, there are mentions of several unsolved crimes that have similar features to what was happening at the Riza estate. In 1803 and 1805, before the family arrived in Sicily, a series of disappearances of young women from the lower social strata occurred in In several cases, their bodies were found with strange ritual markings. The investigation of these crimes was suddenly stopped in 1805 by order from above, and all materials and cases were removed from the police archive. Dr. Marina Costantini, a historian of criminalistics, comments, "There is a possibility that the Riza family was involved in these crimes even before their move to the countryside. Perhaps it was the growing attention to these cases in Palermo that forced them to seek a more isolated place for their dark practices." Another intriguing aspect of this story is the fate of the church servant Pietro, who disappeared in August of 1809. In his diary, Father Giuseppe expressed confidence that the boy had not run away, as was officially believed, but had become a victim of the Riza family. Among the remains found in the mass grave under the villa, the bones of a teenager were identified, whose age approximately corresponds to Pietro's age at the time of his disappearance. What made the Riza family turn their attention to the church servant? According to one version, Pietro could have accidentally discovered the mechanism built into the confessional and shared his discovery with Father Giuseppe. This would explain why the priest began to suspect that his confessions were being eavesdropped on long before the visit of Father Antonio, who confirmed these suspicions. In one of the last entries in Father Giuseppe's diary, there is a mysterious mention. "Poor Pietro, he saw what he shouldn't have seen and paid the highest price for it. I fear that his fate awaits me as well, but as long as I am alive, I will fight for truth and justice." Another aspect of this story requiring further investigation is the role of local authorities and the church hierarchy in concealing the crimes of the Riza family. Why did no one react to the disappearance of Father Giuseppe and Father Antonio? Why wasn't an investigation launched immediately after their disappearance? Archival documents show that Don Salvatore Riza had close ties with the governor of Palermo and other high-ranking officials. He was known for his generous donations to both secular and ecclesiastical authorities. Perhaps these connections and financial influence helped him avoid close attention to his family's activities. Professor of the History of the Catholic Church, Paolo Montanari, notes, "At that time, Sicily was in a complex political situation. The Napoleonic Wars created an atmosphere of instability, and local authorities were more concerned with maintaining order and their own positions than with investigating the disappearance of a rural priest. As for the church hierarchy, the Bishop of Messina seems to have been the only one who really tried to understand the situation, sending first Father Antonio and then possibly Father Benedetta to investigate. Modern researchers of this case ask the question, could the crimes of the Riza family have remained unpunished for so long if they had not had high patrons? And who were these patrons? Some documents indicate a possible connection between Don Salvatore and high-ranking members of the Napoleonic administration in Italy, which could have provided him with certain protection. An interesting document was found in the Vatican archives, a letter from an unknown priest to Cardinal Consalvi, the Secretary of State of the Holy See, dated 1808. In it, the author warns of a dark brotherhood that has penetrated the highest echelons of power and the church and mentions Sicily as one of the centers of activity of this group. Although the name Riza is not mentioned directly, the description of the activities of this brotherhood has an ominous similarity to what was happening at the family's estate. We thank you for staying with us during this disturbing story. Leave a comment with your thoughts on this story. Returning to the confessional where the documents were found, it is worth noting that it itself is an amazing work of art and engineering. Made of rare woods with skillful carvings depicting scenes from the lives of saints, it was created in such a way that the hidden eavesdropping mechanism was practically indistinguishable, even upon close inspection. Expert in antique furniture Roberta Ferrara, who examined the confessional, notes, "This work was performed by a master of the highest level. The mechanism allowing the secret opening in the back wall is so skillfully integrated into the overall structure that it can only be detected by knowing what to look for. It is particularly noteworthy that the activation of the mechanism does not produce any noise, no creaks or clicks that could betray its existence." In her opinion, the creation of such a confessional required not only skill, but also significant financial costs. We are talking about an amount equivalent to the annual income of a wealthy landowner. This shows how important it was for the Riza family to obtain information through confessions. Interestingly, in Father Giuseppe's diary, there is mention of a meeting with the master who created the confessional. He writes, June 3rd, 1808. Today, In the tavern, I accidentally met a man calling himself Matteo, a cabinet maker from Palermo. Having had a few drinks, he began to boast that he was fulfilling a special order for Don Salvatore, a confessional with a secret. When I showed interest, he suddenly fell silent and hurried away. The next day, I learned that he had left the village at night. This strengthens my suspicions. The fate of this master remains unknown, but there is reason to believe that the Riza family may have gotten rid of him to keep the secrets of the confessional mechanism. Another aspect of this story is so deserving of attention: the role of the women of the Riza family, in particular Donna Lucrezia, the wife of Don Salvatore. In Father Giuseppe's diary, she is rarely mentioned, but always with a touch of anxiety. He writes, "Donna Lucrezia is present at all masses, but never comes to confession. Her gaze makes me feel cold, as if looking into the eyes of a statue and not a living person." Among the documents found in the confessional hiding place are several pages apparently torn from Donna Lucrezia's personal diary. They are written in a strange mixture of Italian and Latin, with inclusions of symbols resembling those found in the basement of the villa. In these notes, she describes her dreams full of blood and strange rituals and mentions the great mission of her family, which consists of opening the gates and awakening the Ancient One. Psychiatrist Carlo Lambroso, who studied these notes, comments, "Donna Lucrezia's texts show signs of severe mental disorder, possibly paranoid schizophrenia with religious delusions. However, there is a system in them, a certain logic, albeit a perverse one. She really believed in some mission, in the necessity of committing ritual crimes to achieve a certain goal." Interestingly, in some local legends, Donna Lucrezia is depicted not as an accomplice to her husband's crimes, but as their initiator and inspirer. According to these stories, it was she who brought to the Riza family the knowledge of ancient rituals and cults inherited from her grandmother, who, rumor has it, was a famous witch in Naples. DNA analysis conducted on the remains found in the mass grave under the Villa Riza revealed an interesting detail. Many of the victims had a rare genetic trait found in less than 1% of the population of Sicily. This trait is associated with a certain type of eye pigmentation, giving them an unusual purple tint under certain lighting. Dr. Francesco Rossi, a geneticist who participated in the study, notes, "This genetic trait is too rare for its presence in most victims to be accidental. It can be assumed that the Riza family deliberately chose their victims based on this characteristic. Perhaps in their perverse mythology, people with such eyes had some special significance." This assumption is confirmed by fragments of a manuscript found in the Villa Riza, presumably written by Donna Lucrezia, which speaks of the children of the Purple Star, whose blood opens the way to the ancient gates. In the summer of 2024, during additional excavations at the site of the Villa Riza, archaeologists discovered yet another shocking piece of evidence of this family's dark activities. In a separate basement room, the entrance to which was carefully disguised, they found the remains of a strange structure resembling an altar or sacrificial site. Around it, the walls were covered with symbols made with paint, the composition of which, as analysis showed, included human blood. But the most disturbing find was a small lead box hidden in a niche under the altar. Inside it was a document written in a mixture of Latin, Greek, and some symbols that did not belong to any known alphabet. The partially deciphered text mentions a great ritual, the completion of which requires the blood of a priest who has made a false oath. Dr. Emilio Conti, an expert in ancient languages and occult texts, comments, "This document represents something like a ritual guide based on distorted interpretations of various religious and mystical traditions. It has elements borrowed from Gnosticism, Kabbalah, and even some pre-Christian Sicilian cults. It is especially alarming that the text contains specific instructions for performing rituals of human sacrifice, and the victims had to possess certain characteristics." In his opinion, the mention of the priest who made a false oath may refer to Father Giuseppe. Perhaps the Riza family saw him not just as an obstacle to their activities, but as a necessary element for their final ritual. This would explain why they kept him captive for so long, instead of killing him immediately. This conclusion is confirmed by the date on Father Giuseppe's portrait from the miniature box, February 7th, 1810. Astronomical tables of that period note that on the night of February 7th to 8th, 1860, there was a partial lunar eclipse visible from the territory of Sicily. Such astronomical events often had special significance in various occult practices. It can be assumed that the Riza family planned to conduct their great ritual during this eclipse, using Father Giuseppe as the main sacrifice. However, something went wrong, and instead, on February 9th, a fire occurred at the estate, destroying most of it and possibly thwarting the family's plans. Returning to the fate of Father Giuseppe, it is worth noting that among the remains found in the basement of the Villa Riza, the bones of a man approximately 35 years old were identified, which corresponds to the priest's age at the time of his disappearance. These bones showed traces of numerous injuries inflicted both during his lifetime and posthumously, indicating cruel torture and possibly ritual dismemberment of the body. Professor of Forensic Medicine Luigi Martini, who examined these remains, notes, "The nature of the damage indicates extreme cruelty. Many injuries were inflicted in such a way as to cause maximum pain, but not lead to a quick death. This speaks to the sadistic tendencies of the tormentors and possibly the ritual nature of the torture." In June of 2024, the Catholic Church officially recognized Father Giuseppe Caruso as a martyr who died for the faith. This procedure was accelerated thanks to the found documents and physical evidence of his martyrdom. A memorial plaque with his name and a brief history of his ministry and struggle against evil has been installed in the Church of Santa Maria del Soccorso. Meanwhile, research in archives throughout Europe has revealed several more cases that may be related to the activities of the Riza family or similar groups. In Naples, Marseille, and Barcelona, between 1800 and 1815, a series of similar crimes occurred, including the disappearance of people with certain physical characteristics and the finding of bodies with traces of ritual practices. Historian of the occult Maria Bianchi comments, "These cases suggest the existence of a broader network, possibly a secret society operating in the Mediterranean in the early 19th century. The Riza family may have been just one cell of this organization. Their sudden move from Palermo to the countryside, and then the son's flight to France after the father's death, may have been part of a plan to relocate the group's activities." She also notes that the period of the Napoleonic Wars created favorable conditions for the activities of such groups. Political chaos, the movement of a large number of people, the weakening of traditional social structures, all this created opportunities for those who wanted to act outside the law and morality. One of the most intriguing aspects of the Riza family story remains the origin of their wealth. Officially, it was believed that Don Salvatore had made his fortune trading silk and spices with the East. However, an analysis of financial documents of that period, preserved in the archives of Palermo, shows a discrepancy between the family's official income and their actual expenses. Economic historian Antonio Ferrara suggests, apparently, the Riza family had some illegal source of income that brought very substantial sums. This could have been smuggling, possibly related to the transportation of not only goods but also people. It is known that during that period, the slave trade, although officially prohibited in most European countries, still flourished in some regions of the Mediterranean. This theory is supported by documents found in the archives of the port of Palermo, indicating that Don Salvatore Riza owned several trading ships that regularly made voyages between Sicily, North Africa, and the Middle East. Officially, these ships transported textiles, spices, and wine, but eyewitness accounts indicate that they sometimes secretly transported people, both slaves and fugitives, willing to pay for illegal transportation. Before we continue our story, think for a moment about how the secrets of the past can be hidden right before our eyes, waiting to be revealed. Another interesting aspect of this story is the fate of the Riza estate. After the fire of 1810, the lands belonging to the family were confiscated by the state and later sold to several small landowners. The ruins of the villa remained untouched for a long time, surrounded by the superstitions of local residents, who believed that the place was cursed. In the 1850s, the new owner of these lands, a wealthy merchant from Palermo, tried to restore the villa, but work was stopped after a series of accidents, including the collapse of part of the wall that killed 2 workers. After that, the place was finally abandoned, and only at the end of the 20th century was the territory of the former estate bought by the state to create an archaeological reserve. Interestingly, legends about ghosts inhabiting the ruins of the Villa Riza have been preserved among local residents. It is said that on a full moon you can hear strange voices and see ghostly figures wandering among the ruined walls. The ghost of a woman in white, presumably Donna Lucrezia, who cannot find peace after all the atrocities she committed, is especially often mentioned. Psychologist and paranormal researcher Dr. Sylvia Romana comments, regardless of the reality of these phenomena, such stories reflect the collective trauma that the local community experienced. The atrocities of the Riza family so shocked the local residents that the memory of them transformed into legends about ghosts and curses passed down from generation to generation. Returning to the confessional in which the documents were found, it is worth noting that after its discovery, it became the object of close study not only by historians and criminal investigators, but also by engineers, admired by the complexity and ingenuity of the eavesdropping mechanism built into it. Mechanical engineer Marco Rossi, who studied the design, notes, "This is an amazing example of engineering thought from the beginning of the 19th century. The mechanism uses a system of small mirrors and acoustic channels that allow not only to hear, but also to see the confessor. At the same time, all the components are so skillfully integrated into the decorative elements of the confessional that it is practically impossible to detect them without prior knowledge." In his opinion, the creation of such a device required not only technical skills, but also a deep understanding of acoustics and optics. The person who designed this mechanism clearly possessed knowledge ahead of his time. This makes one wonder who was actually behind its creation. This mystery led researchers to another interesting discovery. Documents related to a certain Giovanni Merlini, a professor of physics and mathematics, were found in the archives of the University of Palermo, who was dismissed from the university in 1844 for experiments that contradicted Christian morality. After his dismissal, Merli's trail doesn't disappear completely, but there is evidence that he may have been connected to the Riso family. In the diary of one of his colleagues, there's a record. "Poor Giovanni has fallen in with bad company. They say he's been seen in the company of Don Salvatore, a man with a dubious reputation. I fear his knowledge will be used for evil." It can be assumed that Merlini designed the confession mechanism for the Riso family, perhaps in exchange for financial support for his research or under duress. During the investigation, a connection was also discovered between the Iriscami family and high-ranking church officials of that time. Among the documents found in the confessional's hiding place were letters from a certain Monsignor F., who, apparently, informed Don Salvatore about decisions made in the bishopric and warned him about possible investigations into his activities. Church historian Antonio Brunetti suggests that this Monsignor F. could have been Fabrizio Cardinal, the vicar of the Bishop of Palermo in 1711. Documents exist showing that the cardinal led a lavish lifestyle that didn't match his official income. It's possible he was receiving bribes from Don Salvatore in exchange for protection and information. This connection could explain why the official investigation into the disappearance of Father Giuseppe and Father Antonio was conducted so superficially and quickly closed. It also confirms the fears expressed in Father Giuseppe's diary that evil had penetrated deeply into the structures of power, both secular and ecclesiastical. Wherever you're listening to us from, we thank you for your attention to this dark but important story. In 25, as part of the preparations for the beatification of Father Giuseppe Caruso, a large-scale exhibition is planned at the Palermo Historical Museum, where documents and artifacts related to the story will be presented. According to its organizers, the aim of the exhibition is not only to preserve the memory of the martyr, but also to remind us how easily evil can take root, even in the most respected families and institutions, if people turn a blind eye to the first signs of its presence. The investigation into the crimes of the Riso family continues, and new discoveries are constantly being made. In July 2024, Italian and French historians began a joint project to study the fate of Don Salvatore's sons after their escape from Sicily. Preliminary results confirm the hypothesis that they were the Italian brothers executed in Lyon in 1881 for a series of brutal murders. However, recently discovered documents from the French police archives cast a shadow of doubt on this version. According to a prison warden's report, the elder of the brothers, presumably Marco Riso, performed a strange ritual on the eve of his execution, using his blood to draw symbols on the wall of his cell. After that, the warden claims something inexplicable happened. I swear by all the saints that I saw this man's shadow separate from his body and disappear through the wall. In the morning, we found him dead in his cell, but his face was contorted with such horror as I had never seen before. This report was dismissed by his superiors as the ravings of a superstitious man, and officially, the brothers were executed by guillotine. However, some researchers point to a strange coincidence. In the year following the supposed execution of the Risso brothers, a series of murders with clear ritualistic characteristics, similar to the crimes committed on the Risso estate in Sicily, occurred in various cities in France and northern Italy. Could this mean that at least one of the brothers somehow escaped execution, or perhaps there were other members of their brotherhood who continued their work? Forensic historian Laura Bianchi notes, "The story of the Risso family shows us how complex the investigation of past crimes can be. We're dealing not only with fragmentary and sometimes contradictory documents, but also with the fact that many aspects of these crimes were deliberately concealed, both by the perpetrators and by the authorities of the time. Every new discovery raises new questions. And yet, despite the many remaining mysteries, the main outline of this dark story is now clear. The Risso family, hiding behind the respectable facade of wealthy landowners, committed terrible crimes for several years, motivated by perverse religious or occult beliefs. Their victims were ordinary people, whose disappearances often went unnoticed or unexplained. Father Giuseppe Caruso, a young rural priest, whose sense of justice and devotion to his calling did not allow him to turn a blind eye to what was happening, confronted this evil at the cost of his own life. His diary and other documents, miraculously preserved in the confessional's hiding place, became the key to unraveling a mystery that had been hidden for over 200 years. Today, the Church of Santa Maria del Soccorso, where Father Giuseppe served, has become a place of pilgrimage for believers from all over Italy. The confessional, once used as an instrument of evil, is now on display in the church museum as a reminder of the dark pages of the past and of the courage of those who stood up to evil even in the face of death. Local residents claim that ever since the mystery of Father Giuseppe's disappearance was solved, the strange voices and whispers that had disturbed parishioners and priests for many years have no longer been heard in the church. Perhaps the soul of the young priest finally found peace when the truth about his martyrdom became known to the world. And yet, some questions remain unanswered. What happened to Father Giuseppe's body after his death? Do the remains found in the basement of Villa Risso really belong to him? Who actually set the fire that destroyed the estate? And most importantly, were Don Salvatore's sons really the last members of their dark brotherhood? Or did this sinister tradition continue after their supposed execution? These questions may never receive definitive answers, but the story of Father Giuseppe Caruso and his opposition to the Risso family will remain a powerful reminder that even one person who is true to his principles and willing to fight for the truth can ultimately defeat evil, no matter how powerful it may seem. In a quiet rural church on the outskirts of Palermo, a candle burns today in memory of the priest who gave his life for his flock. And as long as that candle burns, the story of Father Giuseppe will remind us of the power of faith, courage, and the pursuit of justice in the face of the darkest evil. The next time you see an old church or an ancient confessional, pause for a moment. What secrets might be hidden behind their walls? What stories could they tell if they could speak? The story of Father Giuseppe Caruso shows us that sometimes the darkest secrets can be hidden in the most sacred places, waiting for their hour to finally come to light. Leave comments with your thoughts about this story and what other hidden pages of history you would like to see revealed in our future stories.